The numbers on my phone screen blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. $30,000. I blinked, hoping the digits would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. They didn't. The bank statement remained unchanged, a digital testament to my husband Peter's betrayal. The quiet of our Portland home felt suffocating as I sat at our kitchen table, the morning light streaming through windows I'd cleaned just yesterday, creating shadows that seemed to mock the darkness growing in my heart. I'm Amanda Wilson, and this is the story of how my husband's gambling addiction led me to the hardest decision of my life. But more importantly, it's the story of how I found the strength to choose myself when the world seemed determined to break me. That morning started like any other. I was grading art projects from my high school students, sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one my class had given me last Christmas. Peter had left early for what he claimed was a real estate showing. I believed him. I always believed him. Until my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your husband owes us money. Big money. Time's running out." The walls of our comfortable suburban home on Maple Street suddenly felt like they were closing in. The carefully curated life we'd built over 8 years of marriage started crumbling around me, one revelation at a time. It wasn't just text messages anymore. It was threatening calls, strange men driving past our house, and the growing pit in my stomach every time Peter looked at his phone and his face went pale. That's when I discovered the second mortgage he'd taken out on our home without my knowledge. The maxed-out credit cards hidden in a shoebox in his closet. The loans from his brother Rob that were never meant for business investments. Each revelation was another crack in the foundation of our marriage, another betrayal that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the man I'd promised to love forever. The art room at Cedar Grove High School became my sanctuary during those dark days. While my students splashed color across canvases and shaped clay with hopeful hands, I tried to mold my own life back into something recognizable. But every afternoon, I'd return home to find Peter waiting, his eyes desperate, his promises empty. "Just this once, Amanda," he'd plead, his voice cracking. "If we can just pay this off, I swear I'll never gamble again. I'll get help. We can start fresh." His words were as hollow as our bank account, but the love I still felt for him made them hard to resist. Until that Wednesday evening when everything changed. I sat at our kitchen table, the same spot where I'd first discovered the depth of his addiction. Peter paced behind me, his footsteps heavy with urgency. "They're giving me one last chance," he said, his voice tight with desperation. "If we can come up with $30,000 by Friday, they'll wipe the slate clean. We can sell your car, use your inheritance from your aunt." The words hit me like physical blows. My car, the independence I'd worked so hard for. My inheritance, the last gift from the woman who'd taught me to stand on my own 2 feet. And suddenly, with crystal clarity, I understood. This wouldn't be the last time. There would always be another debt, another crisis, another reason for me to sacrifice everything I'd worked for. "No," I whispered, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Years of saying yes, of trying to fix everything, of putting his needs first, they all led to this moment. This tiny word that would change everything. Peter stopped pacing. The silence in our kitchen was deafening. "What did you say?" His voice had an edge I'd never heard before, something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. "I said no, Peter. I won't give you my inheritance. I won't sell my car. I can't keep enabling this." What happened next plays in my mind like a scene from someone else's life. The way his face contorted with rage, the sound of his fist hitting the wall beside my head, the way my heart pounded. As he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin as he dragged me toward the door. "Get out!" he roared, his face inches from mine. "If you won't help me, if you won't stand by me when I need you most, then get out. Don't come back until..." You're ready to be a real wife." The door slammed behind me with such force that the windows rattled. I stood on our front porch, my purse clutched to my chest, wearing nothing but my teaching clothes and the bracelet Claire had given me for my birthday last month. The evening air was cool against my tear-stained cheeks as the reality of my situation sank in. My first instinct was to apologize, to go back inside and give in. It would be easier, wouldn't it? To just let him take my inheritance, to believe his promises one more time. But as I stood there, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, something inside me shifted. The same strength that had helped me build a career, inspire students, and create a life I was proud of. It was still there, waiting to be called upon. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called Claire. My best friend answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "I need help," I managed to say before the tears started falling again. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Claire's downtown apartment, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands as I told her everything. The gambling, the threats, the violence that had been simmering beneath the surface of our marriage for longer than I wanted to admit. "You're not going back," Claire said firmly, her nurse's efficiency kicking in as she examined the bruises, forming on my arm. "We'll figure this out together, but you're not going back to that house." That night, as I lay on Claire's couch staring at the ceiling, I thought about all the red flags I'd ignored. The late nights at real estate meetings, the mysterious phone calls, the way money seemed to disappear from our accounts with no explanation. I'd been so busy trying to keep our marriage together that I'd forgotten to protect myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in my teaching career. Instead of heading to my classroom, I spent the day at First Oregon Bank, speaking with financial advisors and lawyers. The truth about our finances was even worse than I'd imagined. Peter hadn't just gambled away his own money. He'd taken loans in my name, forged my signature on documents, and nearly depleted our savings. But amid the devastation, I found hope. My inheritance was in a separate account he couldn't access. My car was in my name only. I had options. I just needed the courage to take them. A week passed in a blur of legal consultations and tearful conversations. Peter alternated between threats and pleas, flooding my phone with messages that ranged from "I'll destroy you" to "Baby, please come home, I need you." Each message strengthened my resolve. Susan, the school counselor, became an unexpected ally. She connected me with Portland Hope Center, a support group for people affected by gambling addiction. Sitting in a circle of strangers who understood exactly what I was going through, I finally felt less alone. "You didn't cause this," Maria, my support group leader, told me during one session. "You can't control it, and you can't cure it. The only person you can save is yourself." Those words became my mantra as I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I found a small apartment near the school, decorated with art from my students and furniture, from Claire's parents' basement. I filed for divorce, changed my phone number, and started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. The hardest part wasn't the logistics, it was facing the shame. Shame that I'd let things go so far that I hadn't seen the signs earlier, that I'd almost given up everything to save someone who didn't want to be saved. But slowly, that shame turned to understanding, and understanding turned to strength. 2 months after Peter threw me out of our house, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by my art supplies and the peace I'd fought so hard to find. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Harris, who'd been helping me navigate the legal aspects of Peter's fraud. "Thought you'd want to know. He's agreed to enter rehab. You did the right thing." I set my phone down and walked to the window, watching the sunset over Portland's skyline. The same sky I'd stared at the night Peter kicked me out now held a different meaning. It wasn't an ending anymore. It was a beginning. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in my story, please know that you're not alone. Your safety matters. Your peace matters. Your future matters. There are people waiting to help you, just like Claire, Susan, and Maria helped me. Don't wait until the situation becomes dangerous. Don't sacrifice your well-being for someone who's not willing to help themselves. Today, I'm still teaching art at Cedar Grove High School. My students tell me I smile more now. I'm learning to trust again, to build boundaries, to put myself first, without feeling guilty. Peter's addiction didn't just take our money. It took years of my life, my sense of security, and my belief in fairy tale endings. But it gave me something too. The knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. If you're watching this, please remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the most loving choice is to walk away. And sometimes being thrown out of your house is actually life giving you a push towards something better. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of survival, strength, and starting over. Your story matters too, and I'd love to hear it in the comments below.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Remember, we rise by lifting each other up. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay strong, stay safe, and never be afraid to choose yourself. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Claire's apartment, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I sat at her kitchen counter, staring at my phone as another message from Peter lit up the screen. 3 days had passed since he'd thrown me out, and the reality of my situation was starting to sink in like lead in my stomach. "Just hear me out, Amanda," the message read. "I've found a way to fix everything. Meet me at the Blue Door Cafe. 1 hour." My hands trembled as I set the phone face down on the counter. The familiar scent of Claire's coffee maker filled the air, grounding me in the present moment. I closed my eyes, remembering the look in Peter's eyes that night, the wild desperation, the rage that had transformed my husband into someone I barely recognized. Claire emerged from her bedroom, already dressed in her nurse's scrubs. She took one look at my face and knew. "He's texting again, isn't he?" I nodded, pushing my untouched toast away. "He wants to meet. Says he has a solution." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "You know it's just another scheme," Claire said softly, sliding into the seat beside me. "Remember what Detective Harris said? Don't meet him alone. Don't give him any more chances to manipulate you." Deep down, I knew she was right. But 8 years of marriage don't just disappear overnight. Each message from Peter tugged at the parts of my heart that still remembered the good times. The way he used to surprise me with coffee before my morning classes. How he'd spend hours helping me set up my art room at the beginning of each school year. The sound of my phone buzzing again made us both jump. This time, it was Rob, Peter's brother. "Amanda, please. He's a mess without you. Just talk to him. The debt collectors are getting more aggressive. He needs you." Claire reached over and gently took my phone. "You need to block them both," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Rob's been enabling Peter's gambling for years. He's part of the problem, not the solution." As she spoke, memories flooded back. All the times Rob had covered for Peter, the business loans that were really gambling debts, the way he'd laugh off my concerns about Peter's late nights and mysterious absences. "It's just how he unwinds," Rob would say. "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right?" I felt something shift inside me, like a key turning in a lock. "You're right," I whispered, then louder. "You're right. Block them both." Claire squeezed my hand as I navigated through my phone settings, my finger hovering over the block button. Each press felt like both an ending and a beginning. Block Peter. Block Rob. Block the numbers that had been sending threatening messages about the gambling debt. "What now?" I asked, feeling strangely lighter despite the weight of my circumstances. Claire smiled. that determined smile I'd come to rely on over the past few days. Now, we get you to work. Your students need you. And then after school, we're meeting with my friend at the bank. It's time to protect what's yours. The drive to Cedar Grove High School felt surreal. I borrowed Claire's car since mine was still at the house. Another problem to solve. Another battle to face. As I pulled into the faculty parking lot, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The bruises on my arm had faded to a sickly yellow, easily hidden beneath my cardigan. But the shadows under my eyes told their own story. Inside my classroom, the familiar smell of paint and clay brought tears to my eyes. This room had always been my sanctuary, a place where creativity flowed freely and problems seemed to dissolve in the face of artistic expression. My students' artwork lined the walls, each piece a testament to courage, to trying something new, to making mistakes and learning from them. "Mrs. Wilson?" A voice startled me from my thoughts. Jenny Martinez, one of my senior students, stood in the doorway. "Are you okay? You weren't here yesterday." I managed a smile, touched by her concern. "I'm fine, Jenny. Just dealing with some personal matters." She nodded, but her eyes were knowing beyond her 17 years. "My mom went through something similar last year," she said quietly. "When my dad's drinking got bad, she stayed with my aunt for a while. It gets better, you know." Before I could respond, more students began filing in for first period. But Jenny's words stayed with me throughout the day, weaving between lessons on color theory and ceramic techniques. It gets better. Such a simple phrase, yet it held the weight of hope. During my free period, I met with Susan Parker, the school counselor. Her office was a haven of calm, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that seemed to invite confidences. "I've made some calls," Susan said, passing me a folder filled with resources. "The Portland Hope Center has an excellent program for families affected by gambling addiction. They can help you understand what you're dealing with, connect you with legal aid, even assist with temporary housing if needed." I leafed through the papers, overwhelmed by the support I'd never known existed. "I keep wondering if I'm overreacting," I admitted. "If I should just go back, try to work things out." Susan leaned forward, her expression serious. "Amanda, listen to me. Financial abuse is still abuse. What Peter's done, taking out loans in your name, gambling away your savings, trying to force you to use your inheritance to pay his debts, these are serious crimes. You're not overreacting. You're finally reacting." Her words hit me like a physical force, breaking through the last remnants of denial I'd been clinging to. I thought about the threatening messages, the strangers driving past our house, the fear that had become my constant companion. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The night he threw me out. It wasn't just because I refused to pay the debt. I found something in his email. He'd been planning to take out a loan against my retirement account. He had all my information, my social security number, everything ready to go." Susan's face darkened. "That's identity theft, Amanda. We need to report this." The rest of the school day passed in a blur. After the final bell, Claire picked me up and we drove to First Oregon Bank. Her friend Marcus, a financial advisor, was waiting for us. The next 2 hours were a crash course in financial self-defense. We froze my credit, documented unauthorized transactions, and began the process of separating my finances from Peter's. Marcus's face grew increasingly grave as he uncovered the extent of Peter's financial manipulation. "The good news," Marcus said, "is that your inheritance is safe. He couldn't access that account without your physical presence and signature. The bad news is that he's taken out several loans using your joint accounts as collateral. We need to act fast to protect your assets." As we left the bank, the sun was setting over Portland, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Claire suggested we grab dinner, but I needed space to process everything. Instead, I asked her to drop me at the small park near her apartment. Sitting on a bench, watching families pack up their picnic blankets and children reluctantly leave the playground, I pulled out my phone. There were 6 missed calls from Peter, 4 from Rob, and dozens of messages. With trembling fingers, I opened the last one. "You're ruining everything," Peter had written. "These people want their money. They know where you work. Where Claire? Lives. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The threat was clear, but instead of fear, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I thought about Jenny's words from this morning. It gets better. I thought about Susan's assertion that financial abuse is still abuse. I thought about Marcus's patient explanations of how to protect myself going forward. Opening my notes app, I began to write, documenting every threat, every manipulation, every instance of financial abuse I could remember. Dates, times, amounts. Everything that had seemed like isolated incidents now formed a clear pattern of calculated destruction. A text from Claire broke my concentration. "Coming to check on you, bringing reinforcements." 20 minutes later, Claire arrived with Maria from the Portland Hope Center and Detective Harris. We sat on adjacent benches, the evening air growing. Cooler as I shared everything: the documented threats, the unauthorized loans, the attempted identity theft. "You've done the hardest part," Detective Harris said, reviewing my notes. "You've chosen to protect yourself. Now let us help you protect your future." Maria nodded, her kind face serious in the gathering dusk. "What Peter's doing, using threats, manipulation, financial abuse, it's a common pattern with gambling addicts, but you're breaking that pattern. You're showing others it's possible to choose a different path." As they spoke, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying began to lift. For the first time since Peter had thrown me out, I felt truly seen. Not as a failed wife, not as a victim, but as a survivor who was finding her voice. Later that night, back in Claire's apartment, I sat at her kitchen counter again. But this time, instead of staring at threatening messages, I was writing emails to a divorce attorney Susan had recommended, to my aunt who'd left me the inheritance Peter had tried to take, to my principal explaining that I might need time off for court dates. Claire sat beside me, offering silent support as I typed. When I finally finished, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You know that, right?" I nodded against her shoulder, tears falling freely now. But they weren't tears of fear or shame anymore. They were tears of release, of relief, of recognition that sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us to our greatest strength. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone lit up with one final message from Peter. "You can't ignore me forever, Amanda. You need me more than you know." Looking at his words, I felt nothing but pity. He was wrong. I didn't need him. I needed myself, the self I was rediscovering, the self that had been buried under years of manipulation and fear. And that self was growing stronger every day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, dealing with the police, facing the reality of divorce, rebuilding my financial independence. But tonight, in the quiet of Claire's guest room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The peace that comes from choosing yourself, from saying no to abuse, from recognizing that you deserve better. I thought about my art room, at school, about the lessons I taught my students about perspective. How changing the way you look at something can transform your entire understanding of it. Perhaps that's what I was doing now, changing my perspective, seeing my life through new eyes. The last thing I did before falling asleep was set my phone to Do Not Disturb, blocking out Peter's threats and Rob's manipulations. Tomorrow would be another day of rebuilding, of rediscovering, of choosing myself. And for the first time since this all began, I was ready to face it. Outside, The Portland night wrapped around Claire's apartment like a protective blanket. Somewhere in the city, Peter was probably still gambling, still trying to find a way out of his self-made maze of addiction and debt. But his choices were no longer my burden to bear. I had my own path to follow now, and though it wasn't the one I'd planned, it was leading me toward something better, toward freedom, toward strength, toward a future I could build on my own terms. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone, steps seemingly endless as I made my way up. My heels clicked against each step, the sound echoing my racing heartbeat. Detective Harris walked beside me, her presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of why we were here. Today was the preliminary hearing, and I would face Peter for the first time since that night he threw me out. Inside, the marble halls felt cold despite the summer heat outside. Claire sat on a wooden bench, already waiting. She'd taken the morning off from her nursing shift to be here, and the dark circles under her eyes told me she'd probably come straight from a night rotation. The sight of her gave me strength. She'd risked everything to help me, and I wouldn't let her down now. "The paperwork's ready," Detective Harris said, handing me a manila folder. "Everything's documented, the forged loans, the threats, the break-in attempt. You just need to tell your story." My story. Such simple words for something that felt so complicated. How do you compress months of manipulation, years of enabling, and a lifetime of lost dreams into testimony that would fit into a court schedule? The weight of the gold locket around my neck, my grandmother's, one of the few pieces of jewelry I'd managed to retrieve from the house, suddenly felt heavy. Sarah Chen, my lawyer, appeared around the corner, her black briefcase matching her impeccable suit. "They're ready for us," she said, her expression professional but kind. "Remember what we practiced. Just tell the truth, Amanda. Your truth is powerful enough." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Nothing like the grand spaces shown on television. Peter sat at the defendant's table, his shoulders hunched in a suit that seemed too big for him now. Had he lost weight, or was it just that I was seeing him clearly for the first time? His brother Rob sat directly behind him, and the sight of them both made my stomach clench. As I took my place on the witness stand, Peter looked up. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Regret? Anger? Manipulation? I'd spent so many years trying to read his expressions, to anticipate his moods, to walk the tightrope of his addiction. Not anymore. Sarah began her questioning gently, leading me through the early days of our marriage, the first signs of Peter's gambling addiction, the gradual erosion of our finances and my self-worth. With each answer, my voice grew stronger. The judge leaned forward slightly, her pen moving across her notepad as I described discovering the forged loan documents, the threatening messages, the night Peter threw me out. "And what happened after you refused to give him your inheritance?" Sarah asked. I took a deep breath, my fingers tracing the grain of the wooden witness stand. He became someone I didn't recognize. His face. It was like a mask had slipped. He grabbed my arm, dragged me to the door. I can still hear his voice. "Get out! Don't come back until you're ready to be a real wife." As if being a real wife meant letting him destroy both our lives with his addiction. Peter's lawyer objected, claiming my statement was prejudicial. The judge overruled him. I continued, describing the escalating threats, the break-in at Claire's apartment, the terror of realizing nowhere felt safe anymore. Through it all, Peter stared at the table, his shoulders increasingly tense. Then came the cross-examination. Peter's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie with manicured fingers that flashed with an expensive ring. "Mrs. Wilson, isn't it true that you abandoned your husband in his time of need?" The question hit like a physical blow, but I was ready for it. "No," I said clearly. "I refuse to enable his addiction anymore. There's a difference." "And isn't..." It true that you had access to funds that could have resolved this situation? Funds you chose to withhold? I sat straighter in my chair. You mean my inheritance? The money my grandmother left me? Yes, I had access to it. And yes, I chose not to give it to men who were threatening our lives over gambling debts. That wasn't abandonment. That was self-preservation. The questioning continued, each attempt to paint me as cold or uncaring meeting with clear, honest responses. I could feel Claire's supportive presence behind me, could sense Detective Harris watching carefully. But mostly, I felt something new growing inside me. Not just strength, but clarity. When Peter's lawyer finally sat down, the judge asked if I had anything else to add. I looked directly at Peter for the first time since taking the stand. Yes, Your Honor. I want to make something clear. I didn't choose to end my marriage. Peter's addiction did that. I didn't choose to leave my home. His decisions forced that. The only choice I made was to save myself, and it was the hardest and best decision of my life. The judge nodded, making a final note before calling a recess. As I stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs, Claire was immediately at my side. We walked past Peter and Rob, their whispered conversations stopping as we passed. In Chatias, the hallway, I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding all morning. You did great, Detective Harris said, joining us with coffee from the courthouse cafe. The judge was clearly moved by your testimony. Sarah appeared moments later, her expression cautiously optimistic. The protection order will almost certainly be extended, she said. And with the evidence we presented about the financial fraud and conspiracy with the debt collectors, we're in a strong position for both the criminal case and the divorce proceedings. I sipped the coffee, letting its warmth steady me. Through the courthouse windows, I could see the Portland skyline, the familiar buildings that had watched my life unravel and begin to rebuild. A memory surfaced. Peter and me on our first date, walking along the waterfront, full of dreams and promises. How far away that seemed now. What happens next? I asked Sarah. The judge will rule on the protection order today. The criminal charges will take longer, weeks, maybe months. But for now, you've done everything you can. The rest is up to the legal system. Claire checked her watch. We should get you to the Hope Center. You have the art therapy group. This afternoon, remember? The reminder of my new life, my real life, helped ground me. Yes, I had a group to lead, women waiting to find their own healing through art, women who, like me, were learning to reclaim their stories. As we left the courthouse, I heard footsteps behind us. Amanda, wait! Rob's voice made me freeze. Claire stepped closer to me protectively as Peter's brother approached, his face flushed. Just hear me out, he said, holding up his hands. Peter's sorry. He knows he messed up. If you could just talk to him, maybe we could work something out. The family could help with the gambling debts. Step back, sir, Detective Harris interrupted, moving between us. You know about the protection order. I touched her arm, gently. It's okay. I turned to Rob, seeing him clearly too for the first time, another enabler in Peter's web of addiction. There's nothing to work out, Rob. Peter needs help, but not from me. Not anymore. Rob's face darkened. So you're just going to walk away? After everything the family did for you? The old Amanda would have felt guilty, would have second-guessed herself. But standing there in the summer sun with my support system around me, I felt only peace. The family did nothing for me except try to make me as small as possible, I said quietly. Peter's addiction, your enabling, the constant pressure to sacrifice myself for his problems, it ends now. If you really want to help your brother, get him into rehab, but leave me out of it. I turned away from Rob's stunned face, walking toward Claire's car with my head high. Behind us, I could hear Detective Harris warning Rob about the consequences of violating the protection order, but her voice faded as a weight lifted from my shoulders. The drive to the Hope Center was quiet. each of us lost in our own thoughts. The familiar building came into view, not grand like the courthouse, but welcoming in its simplicity. Through the windows, I could see the art room where my group would meet, easels waiting like old friends. "Want me to stay?" Claire asked as she pulled into a parking space. I shook my head, managing a small smile. "I need to do this part alone, but thank you for everything." Inside, Maria was preparing coffee and arranging chairs for the afternoon session. She took one look at my face and opened her arms. I stepped into her embrace, letting out a shuddering breath. "Rough morning?" she asked softly. "Actually, no," I realized, pulling back to meet her concerned gaze. "Hard, yes, but not rough. For the first time, I feel like I'm standing on solid ground." Maria smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Good. Channel that feeling into today's session. The women need to see what strength looks like in recovery." I changed into the paint-splattered smock I kept at the center, rolling up my sleeves and setting out supplies for the afternoon's project. Today's theme was transformations, fitting given the morning's events. As I arranged watercolors and brushes, I thought about my own transformation, still ongoing, but real. The women began arriving, each carrying their own stories of survival. Rebecca came first, as always, her canvas from last week tucked under her arm. She'd been making remarkable progress, both in her art and in her healing journey. Others followed. Maria's sister Lucy, escaping an emotionally abusive marriage. Grace, rebuilding her life after her husband's gambling addiction had cost them everything. Sarah, young but wise beyond her years, fleeing an arranged marriage. "Before we begin," I said once everyone was settled at their easels, "I want to share something with you." I testified in court this morning, facing the man who tried to destroy me with his addiction. It was hard, but I found strength I didn't know I had. That's what we're exploring today. The strength that lives in all of us, waiting to be discovered. The session flowed naturally from there, each woman finding her own way to express her journey on canvas. I moved among them, offering gentle guidance, sharing techniques, but mostly just witnessing their courage as they confronted their pain through art. Rebecca's painting caught my eye, a butterfly emerging from a dark chrysalis, its wings still wet but reaching for light. "It's beautiful," I said, standing beside her easel. "It's me," she replied softly. "Or who I'm becoming. I signed the lease on my own apartment yesterday. First time I've lived alone in 15 years. I squeezed her shoulder gently. The wings get stronger with use. As the session wound down, I noticed Grace lingering over her painting, adding careful details to what looked like a series of doors, some open, some closed, some barely visible in shadow. "What do you see when you look at them?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment, brush hovering over the canvas. "Choices," she finally said. "All the doors I thought were closed forever. Maybe they're not. Maybe I just needed to find the right key." Her words stayed with me as I cleaned up after the session, washing brushes and arranging supplies for tomorrow's group. Each brush stroke these women made was an act of reclaiming their stories, their choices, their futures. Just like my testimony this morning had been my own act of reclamation. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "Judge extended the protection order. Full hearing in 6 weeks. You did good today, Amanda." I sat down at my own easel, pulling out a fresh canvas. The late afternoon light slanted through the windows, creating patterns on the blank surface. I thought about Grace's doors, Rebecca's butterfly, all the metaphors we create to understand our journeys. My brush moved almost of its own accord, colors blending and flowing. I painted the courthouse steps, but not as they had appeared this morning, imposing and daunting. Instead, I painted them as I saw them now, a mountain already climbed, a challenge already met. At the top, I painted a figure standing tall, face turned toward the sun. Maria found me still painting as evening approached. "That's powerful," she said, studying the canvas. "You should display it at the center's gallery night next month." I considered her suggestion, looking at the painting with fresh eyes. "Maybe I will. Other women should know they can climb their own mountains." "Speaking of which," Maria said, pulling up a chair beside me, "the center's board met this morning. They want to expand the art therapy program, offer more sessions. They'd like you to take on a bigger role, maybe develop a curriculum we can share with other centers." The opportunity took my breath away. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to transform my pain into purpose, to help others find the healing I'd discovered through art. I'd need to cut back on my teaching hours at school, I mused, already mentally rearranging my schedule. "The universe has a way of opening doors when we're ready to walk through them," Maria said, echoing Grace's earlier metaphor. Looking at my painting, at the strong figure I'd created, I knew my answer. "Yes," I said simply. "I'll do it." Maria hugged me, then left me to finish my work. I added final touches to the painting as darkness fell outside the windows. In the quiet of the art room, surrounded by the creative energy of the day's session, I felt a deep sense of rightness. My phone buzzed again, Claire checking in. "Dinner at my place?" she offered. "I'm making that pasta you like." I texted back a quick agreement, then began packing up my supplies. As I covered my canvas for the night, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had climbed those courthouse steps this morning. She wasn't the same one Peter had thrown out of their house over a gambling debt. She was someone stronger, someone who had found her voice and was learning to use it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more legal proceedings, more healing to do, more women to help find their own strength. But tonight, I would have dinner with my best friend, celebrate small victories, and continue painting my way toward whatever future awaited. I turned off the lights in the art room, my footsteps echoing in the quiet building. Outside, the Portland evening was soft with summer warmth, full of possibilities I was finally ready to explore. The canvas under my arm held more than just paint and color. It held proof that transformations were possible, that strength could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest art comes from healing our deepest wounds. As I drove to Claire's apartment, I thought about all the women I'd met on this journey. The ones who had helped me, the ones I was helping now, the ones still finding their way to places like the Hope Center. We were all artists in our own way, creating new lives from the fragments of broken dreams, painting futures bright with promise and possibility. The city lights blurred slightly as happy tears filled my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't driving away from something, running from Peter's addiction or hiding from his debts. I was driving toward something, toward friendship, toward purpose, toward a life that was finally, completely my own. The Portland Hope Center buzzed with quiet energy as I set up for my first art therapy session. Sunlight streamed through, the tall windows illuminating the easels I'd arranged in a circle. Fresh paper, untouched pastels, and clean brushes waited for hands that needed healing as much as I did. Maria helped me arrange the final details, her presence calming my nerves. "Remember," she said, adjusting a vase of fresh flowers on the welcome table, "you're not just teaching art, you're creating a safe space for recovery." I nodded, smoothing my shirt and checking my reflection in the window. 6 weeks had passed. Since the break-in at Claire's apartment, 6 weeks since Peter's arrest. The bruises had faded, but deeper changes had taken root. My eyes looked clearer now, more focused. The constant tension in my shoulders had begun to ease. The first participant arrived early, a woman perhaps a few years older than me. She introduced herself as Rebecca, her voice barely above a whisper. As she chose an easel, I noticed how she positioned herself to keep the door in view, a habit I recognized from my own hypervigilance in those early days after leaving Peter. Others filtered in gradually, Each face told a story of survival, of battles fought in silence. Some wore their wariness openly, while others masked it behind careful smiles. By the time we began, 8 women had gathered, each carrying invisible weights I was only beginning to understand. Art, I began, my teacher's voice steadier than I expected, gives us permission to express what words sometimes can't. Today, we're not trying to create masterpieces. We're creating space for ourselves to breathe, to feel, to begin healing. I demonstrated a simple technique using pastels, showing how different pressures could create varying intensities of color. As the women began to work, the room filled with the soft sounds of chalk on paper, punctuated by occasional sighs or murmurs of frustration. Rebecca's hand shook as she selected a deep blue pastel. "I haven't drawn since high school," she admitted. He always said it was a waste of time." The familiar echo of criticism in her voice made my heart ache. How many times had Peter dismissed my art as a hobby, something less important than his real estate deals and gambling pursuits? I moved closer to Rebecca's easel, careful not to crowd her space. "Every stroke you make is valid," I told her, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Every color you choose belongs to you. This is your space to reclaim." As the session progressed, something remarkable happened. The tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by focused concentration and occasional moments of shared understanding. One woman's tears as she filled her paper with angry red swirls were met with quiet nods of recognition. Another's triumphant smile when she successfully captured a memory of her grandmother's garden brought answering smiles around the circle. After the session, as I cleaned brushes and straightened supplies, Maria brought me a cup of tea. "You did well," she said. "I saw a lot of breakthrough moments today." I thought about Rebecca's final piece, a small blue bird partially emerging from darkness. "I'm learning as much as they are," I admitted. "Every story I hear helps me understand my own journey better." The next morning, I had my first meeting with my new lawyer, Sarah Chen. Her office overlooked the Willamette River, the water glinting like scattered diamonds in the morning sun. She reviewed the stack of documents I'd brought: bank statements, forged loan applications, threatening messages from Peter's gambling associates. "The good news," Sarah said, her fingers steepled on her desk, "is that we have a strong case for both divorce and criminal charges. The bad news is that Peter's associates are still out there, and they're not going to simply write off that debt." I twisted the strap of my purse, remembering the terror of the break-in. "What are my options?" "We file for an emergency protection order," Sarah replied promptly. "Not just against Peter, but against anyone acting on his behalf. We document every threat, every attempt at contact, and most importantly, we get you completely financially disentangled from him." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of paperwork and legal terminology. By lunch, I had signed more documents than I could count, each one another step toward freedom. As I left Sarah's office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Money's still owed. Clock's ticking. Ask Peter about the storage unit." I forwarded the message to Detective Harris before blocking the number. The mention of a storage unit was new, another secret in Peter's web of lies. But instead of the paralyzing fear these messages used to invoke, I felt a surge of determination. The police found the storage unit that afternoon. Inside, they discovered evidence of Peter's gambling that spanned years. Casino receipts, luxury items purchased with borrowed money, and most damning of all, notebooks detailing his system for maximizing credit card cash advances and manipulating online gambling sites. "This is the missing piece we needed," Detective Harris told me over the phone. "With this evidence, we can prove long-term criminal intent. Your divorce case just got a lot stronger." That evening, I met Claire for dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant. The familiar spices and quiet buzz of conversation felt like a welcome return to normalcy. Claire's apartment had been repaired, but she'd decided to move, unable to feel safe in the space that had been violated. "I found a place closer to the hospital," she told me, stirring her pad thai. "Better security, covered parking. You should think about finding your own place too. Maria's been amazing, but it's time to spread my wings," I finished, smiling. "Actually, I've been looking at apartments near the Hope Center. There's one available in that converted warehouse building. You know, the one with the art gallery on the first floor." Claire's face lit up. "The Riverside Arts Complex? Amanda, that would be perfect for you." The next day, I toured the apartment. The space was smaller than what I'd had with Peter, but the high ceilings and massive windows made it feel open and full of possibility. The building had security cameras, key card access, and a front desk staffed 24/7. But what truly sold me was the small studio space that came with each unit, a perfect place to set up my easel and continue my own artistic journey. As I signed the lease application, I felt a familiar twist of anxiety. The rent would stretch my budget thin, even with my teaching salary and the part-time work at the Hope Center. But then I remembered the inheritance Peter had tried to steal, safely locked away in an account he couldn't touch. This was what that money was for, not paying off gambling debts, but investing in my own future. That night, in Maria's spare room, I began packing my belongings. Each item I wrapped represented a choice: what to keep from my old life, what to leave behind. The coffee mug from my students, definitely keeping. The wedding photos I'd salvaged from the house into the donation box. Maria found me sitting, on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes. "Need help sorting through things?" she offered. I held up a small clay sculpture Peter had given me for our first anniversary. "I keep finding pieces of him mixed in with my life. How do I separate it all?" Maria sat beside me, taking the sculpture and turning it in her hands. "Maybe you don't need to separate everything. Some pieces can be reminders of lessons learned, of strength found. The important thing is that you choose what to carry forward." Her words stuck with me as I continued packing. When I came across my old sketchbooks, I spent hours flipping through them, seeing my artistic journey documented in pencil and paint. There were gaps, years where Peter's gambling had consumed all my energy and creativity. But there were also moments of resilience, small acts of artistic rebellion against his control. The next morning, I woke early to prepare for my second art therapy session at the Hope Center. As I arranged supplies, Rebecca arrived early again, this time carrying a small canvas of her own. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said," she explained, setting up her easel. "About reclaiming our space. I bought these supplies yesterday. First time I've spent money on myself in years." I watched as she unpacked her materials, each brush and tube of paint a small act of defiance against the control she'd lived under. Other participants began arriving, many carrying their own art supplies, their faces showing a mix of nervousness and determination. Today's session focused on self-portraits, not of our physical selves, but of our emotional landscapes. As I demonstrated techniques for layering colors and creating texture, I found myself opening up about my own journey. When Peter first started gambling, I made myself smaller, I told them, mixing colors on my palette. I dimmed my own light to avoid casting shadows on his excuses. But here's what I'm learning. Our light isn't meant to be dimmed. Our stories deserve to be painted in full color. The room filled with the sounds of creation, brushes against canvas, soft murmurs of encouragement, occasional tears mixed with determination. One woman painted herself as a mountain, immovable and strong. Another created a garden emerging from concrete, beauty breaking through barriers. Rebecca's piece showed a woman with broken chains at her feet, wings beginning to spread from her shoulders. As she worked, her brushstrokes became more confident, her posture straighter. I recognized the transformation, the same one I saw in my own mirror each morning. After the session, as I cleaned up, my phone buzzed with a message. from Sarah Chen. Good news, it read. Judge granted the emergency protection order. Also, Peter's preliminary hearing is set for next week. Are you ready to testify? I looked around the art room at the evidence of healing and growth on every easel. Then I glanced at my own self-portrait, a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings touched with gold. Was I ready to face Peter in court? To speak my truth in front of strangers? The answer came with surprising clarity. Yes, I was ready. Ready to stand in my truth, to protect my future, to help ensure he couldn't do this to anyone else. The woman who had trembled in fear that night in the kitchen, who had let herself be thrown out of her own home. She was still part of me, but she wasn't all of me anymore. I typed back a simple response. I'm ready. That evening, I visited my new apartment again, this time with Claire and Maria. The empty rooms echoed with possibility as we planned furniture arrangements and discussed color schemes. In the small studio space, I set up my easel, the first piece of furniture to claim its place in my new home. To new beginnings, Claire said, raising an imaginary toast in the empty living room. To freedom, Maria added. I looked at these women who had become my lifeline, my support system, my chosen family. Then I looked out the window at the city skyline, painted in sunset colors that begged to be captured on canvas. To finding our wings, I said softly, and learning to fly. Autumn leaves danced past my office window at the Portland Hope Center, their golden hues catching the morning light. I watched them twirl and spin, so different from the heavy stillness in my chest. The letter on my desk demanded attention. Another notice from Peter's lawyers. More attempts to delay our divorce proceedings. 6 months had passed since that night he'd thrown me out, and still his presence lingered like a shadow at the edges of my life. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Rebecca stood there, clutching her portfolio, her face flushed with excitement. Amanda, do you have a minute? I just got accepted into the community college art program. My own troubles melted away as I jumped up to hug her. This was why I was here, why I'd accepted the position as full-time art therapy coordinator. Every small victory, every step forward taken by the women in our program felt like a personal triumph. The piece that got me in was the one I painted here, Rebecca continued, pulling out a photograph. The Butterfly series, remember? Of course I remembered. I'd watched her progress from tentative sketches to bold, vibrant canvases, each one reflecting her growing confidence. As we looked at the photos together, Maria appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt the celebration, but Amanda, Detective Harris is here. She says it's important. The familiar flutter of anxiety returned to my stomach as I followed Maria to the center's conference room. Detective Harris sat at the table, her expression unreadable. A manila folder lay before her. We found something in Peter's storage unit that you need to see, she said without preamble. During our investigation of the gambling ring, we discovered documents suggesting he'd been planning this for years. The loans, the identity theft, all of it. She opened the folder, spreading papers across the table. Bank statements, loan applications, even surveillance photos of me at work. The scope of Peter's deception took my breath away. He had a whole network, Detective Harris continued. The gambling was just part of it. He was involved in a sophisticated fraud scheme, using information from his real estate clients. Your inheritance wasn't just about covering his gambling. Debts. It was meant to be his escape fund when everything fell apart. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. The leaves outside continued their carefree dance, oblivious to how my world was shifting yet again. All those years, I whispered. I thought I was helping him, supporting him through an addiction, but he was just using me? Maria's hand found my shoulder, grounding me as Detective Harris laid out the rest. The investigation had uncovered dozens of victims, other families destroyed by the fraud ring's operations. Peter wasn't just a gambling addict. He was a willing participant in a criminal enterprise. The good news, Detective Harris said, is that this strengthens both the criminal case against him and your divorce proceedings. The bad news is that some of his associates are still out there, and they're not happy about the investigation. The implication was clear. I still wasn't safe. Not completely. But instead of fear, I felt something else stirring in my chest. Determination. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your testimony when the time comes, and your continued cooperation as we unravel this network. But for now, focus on staying safe and keeping up your good work here. These women need you." After Detective Harris left, I stood at the window watching leaves scatter across the center's small garden. The art therapy room beckoned from across the hall, where my afternoon group would soon gather. Women like Rebecca, finding their strength through creativity and community. Maria joined me at the window. "Want to cancel today's session?" I shook my head. "No. This is exactly where I need to be." The afternoon group was working on a collaborative piece, a mural expressing their journeys from trauma to healing. As I helped Grace mix just the right shade of purple for her section, I thought about my own journey. How each revelation about Peter's deception, though painful, helped me understand the truth of our relationship. "It's like layers of paint," I told the group, demonstrating how colors could build upon each other. "Sometimes what's underneath isn't pretty, but it's part of the whole picture. And sometimes we have to scrape everything away and start fresh." Lucy, working on her portion of the mural, looked up. "Is that what you did? Started fresh?" "I'm still doing it," I admitted. "Every day brings new challenges, new revelations, but also new opportunities for growth." As if to prove my point, Sarah Chen called just as the session was ending. "The judge denied Peter's latest delay tactic," she reported. "Divorce proceedings are back on track. But there's something else. The fraud investigation has frozen most of his assets, including the house." I sat down at my desk, processing this news. The house, our house, had been in limbo since everything fell apart. I'd assumed Peter would sell it to pay his gambling debts. Now it sat empty, another piece of evidence in the growing case against him. "What does this mean for me?" I asked. "It means you have options," Sarah replied. "Given that you can prove the down payment came from your teaching savings, and considering the criminal charges against Peter, we could petition for sole ownership." The possibility hit me like a thunderbolt. The house where I'd lived through years of manipulation and fear could be mine alone. But did I want it? That evening, over dinner with Claire at our favorite Thai restaurant, I turned the question over in my mind. "You could sell it," Claire suggested, stealing a piece of my pad thai. "Use the money to buy something that's truly yours without any memories of him." "Or," Maria added, joining us after her late meeting, "you could transform it into something meaningful. The center's been looking for a satellite location." The idea took root, growing stronger as we discussed possibilities. The house's layout, the spacious basement where Peter had hidden his gambling activities, the sun-filled rooms that had witnessed so much pain. All of it could be repurposed, reformed into a space for healing. Later that night, in my small apartment above the art gallery, I pulled out my sketchbook. The pages filled with possibilities, floor plans transformed into therapy rooms, the garage converted into an art studio, the garden redesigned for meditation and reflection. A text from Detective Harris interrupted my planning. "New development. Need to meet tomorrow. Stay safe." The cryptic message sent a shiver down my spine, but not of fear. Whatever new challenge awaited, I would face it. The woman who had trembled. Before Peter's rage, who had believed his lies and enabled his addiction, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that true strength often comes disguised as vulnerability. I went to sleep that night with my sketchbook beside me, filled with dreams of transformation. In the morning, I had an early meeting with the Hope Center's board to discuss expanding our programs. Then my art therapy group, where Grace would continue work on her door series, now featuring windows and pathways she'd never imagined possible. The autumn wind rattled my windows, sending more leaves dancing through the Portland night. Somewhere out there, Peter's criminal associates might be plotting their next move. The fraud investigation might uncover more painful truths. The journey ahead might hold more challenges than I could imagine, but I was no longer facing these challenges alone. The community I'd found, Claire with her fierce loyalty, Maria with her steady wisdom, Detective Harris with her unwavering commitment to justice, and all the women at the Hope Center, they were my real inheritance, worth more than any amount of money Peter had tried to steal. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Rebecca's Butterfly series, about transformation and growth. Sometimes the most beautiful changes come from the darkest places. Sometimes strength grows best in broken soil. Sometimes being thrown out of your home leads you to find your true place in the world. Tomorrow would bring its own revelations, its own battles, its own opportunities for grace. But tonight, in my small apartment filled with art and possibility, I was exactly where I needed to be. The autumn leaves might be falling, but new growth was already stirring beneath the surface. Morning came with a soft rain, washing the fallen leaves from my windows and casting a gentle light across my easel. I dressed carefully for my board meeting, choosing colors that made me feel strong. Deep purple for courage, silver for clarity. The woman in my mirror looked back with steady eyes, ready to face whatever the day might bring. Detective Harris was waiting in the Hope Center's parking lot when I arrived, her umbrella creating a small shelter from the rain. Her expression told me this wasn't a casual visit. "We've identified more victims," she said as we walked inside. "Women whose husbands were targeted by the gambling ring. They used Peter's real estate connections to find vulnerable families, people struggling with mortgages or medical bills. Then they'd move in with their friendly offers of help." Each word felt like another piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. How many lives had been destroyed while I lived in ignorance? How many families had been torn apart while I made excuses for Peter's behavior? "There's more," Detective Harris continued as we reached my office. "Some of these women have disappeared, gone off the grid after their husbands' debts became too much. We think they might be in danger." I sank into my chair, the weight of this news settling around me like a heavy cloak. How can I help? "We're setting up a task force, working with women's shelters and support organizations. Your work here at the Hope Center, your art therapy program, it could be a way to reach out to these women, help them come forward safely." The magnitude of what she was suggesting took my breath away. This wasn't just about my own healing anymore. It was about creating a safe harbor for others caught in the same storm I'd survived. My board meeting would have to wait. This was more important. The next few hours passed in a blur of planning and phone calls. Maria brought in counselors from other centers. Sarah Chen conferenced in with legal advice. And slowly a framework began to take shape. The Hope Center would become a hub for a new kind of outreach program, using art therapy as a bridge to help women recognize and escape financial abuse. As we worked, I thought about my own journey. How long it had taken me to recognize Peter's manipulation for what it was. How many red flags I'd dismissed as normal relationship struggles. How art had become my lifeline when words failed me. By afternoon, the rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows of the art therapy room. I stood before my easel, adding finishing touches to a piece I'd been working on between sessions. It showed a woman standing at a crossroads, one path leading into shadow, the other toward light. But the true focus was her face. Not afraid, not uncertain, but filled with quiet determination. "That's powerful," Maria said from the doorway. "It should be the first piece in our new outreach materials." I stepped back, seeing the painting with fresh eyes. It needs something more, I mused, reaching for my brushes again. With careful strokes, I added other figures in the background, women emerging from the shadows, reaching out to help each other toward the light. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. News of our expanded program spread quickly through Portland's support network. By evening, 3 more women had found their way to the center, each carrying stories that echoed my own. As I listened to their experiences, I felt something shift inside me, the last pieces of shame and self-doubt falling away. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a guide, helping others find their way through the darkness I'd already navigated. That night, as I packed up my supplies and prepared to head home, Detective Harris stopped by one last time. "You did good today," she said, watching as I covered my easel. "But remember to take care of yourself too. This work, it can be overwhelming." I nodded, understanding her concern. "I know. But for the first time since Peter threw me out, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Doing exactly what I'm meant to do." She smiled, a rare softening of her professional demeanor. "Just remember you're not alone in this fight." As I drove home through Portland's rain-washed streets, I thought about all the women out there, still trapped, in situations like mine had been. Some facing gambling addicts like Peter, others dealing with different forms of financial abuse. Each one believing they were alone, just as I had. But they weren't alone. And neither was I. My apartment welcomed me with the smell of fresh paint and possibility. I'd been working on a new series of paintings, women in various stages of emergence, breaking free from chains they'd once thought were normal. Tomorrow, they would become part of our outreach program, silent witnesses to the power of transformation. A text from Claire lit up my phone. "Proud of you, warrior woman. Dinner tomorrow?" I smiled, typing back a quick yes. Then I turned to my easel, where a blank canvas waited. Outside, the city lights reflected off wet pavement, creating patterns of light and shadow. Inside, I was filled with a quiet certainty. Peter had thrown me out of our house, thinking he would break me. Instead, he had freed me to find my true purpose. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best versions of ourselves. I picked up my brush and began to paint, adding another story to the growing collection of survivors' tales. Each stroke was a testament to resilience, each color a celebration of freedom found through courage. The night deepened around me as I worked, but I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I had learned that the darkest times often come just before dawn, and that sometimes being thrown out of one home leads you to build something far more meaningful. Not just a shelter for yourself, but a beacon of hope for others finding their way through the storm. The gallery lights cast a warm glow over my paintings, transforming the Hope Center's main hall into an intimate space of shared stories. Tonight marked our first major exhibition, Voices of Survival, featuring works created by women in our art therapy program. Each canvas told a story of transformation, of strength found in darkness. Detective Harris moved between the pieces, studying each one with careful attention. She paused before my latest series, 3 panels showing the journey from bondage to freedom. The first depicted hands bound by golden chains, the second showed those chains transforming into butterflies, and the third revealed a woman stepping into light, her shadows becoming wings. "These will help a lot of women," she said quietly. "We've already had 2 more come forward because of your program." I watched as visitors filled the space, social workers, counselors, survivors, and supporters. Among them, I spotted familiar faces from my art therapy groups. Lucy stood before her own painting, explaining its symbolism to an attentive audience. Grace photographed each piece carefully, documenting our collective journey. Sarah Chen arrived carrying a thick folder, her lawyer's briefcase replaced by a stylish clutch for the evening. She made her way to where I stood, her expression both professional and warm. "The judge signed off on the house transfer," she said, keeping her voice low. "It's officially yours now." Peter's lawyers finally stopped fighting it when we presented evidence of the fraud scheme. The news should have felt like a victory, but instead, it stirred complex emotions. The house that had witnessed so much pain would now become something new, a sanctuary for other women seeking escape from financial abuse and addiction. Maria appeared with glasses of sparkling cider, her eyes bright with pride. "To new beginnings," she toasted, "and to the 20 women who found their voices through this program." The exhibition continued into the evening, a steady stream of visitors moving through the transformed space. Rebecca's Butterfly series drew particular attention, its progression from darkness to light resonating with many viewers. She stood nearby, answering questions with growing confidence, her own transformation evident in her straight posture and clear voice. Near closing time, Claire arrived straight from her hospital shift, still in scrubs, but determined not to miss this milestone. She hugged me tightly, then stepped back to survey the room. "Remember that night you showed up at my door?" she asked softly. "Look how far you've come." I was about to respond when Detective Harris approached urgently, her phone in hand. "Amanda, we need to talk, now." We moved to my office where the detective closed the door before speaking. "One of Peter's associates just turned state's evidence. He's revealed details about their operation that, well, you need to hear this." The next hour passed in a blur as she laid out the new information. The gambling ring wasn't just about addiction and debt. It was part of a larger scheme targeting vulnerable families, particularly those with assets they could exploit. Peter's role as a real estate agent had been crucial, helping them identify potential victims. "The house," I whispered, realization dawning. "He chose it because your grandmother left you an inheritance," Detective Harris confirmed. "They played the long game, Amanda. Peter was assigned to target you specifically." The room seemed to spin as years of memories rearranged themselves into this new pattern. Our first meeting at that charity auction, his whirlwind courtship, his insistence that we buy that particular house. It had all been calculated. Maria knocked, softly before entering with tea, her presence steadying as always. "Whatever you learned tonight," she said, placing a cup before me, "remember that your strength isn't measured by what was done to you, but by what you've done since." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, anchoring myself in the present moment. Outside my office, I could hear the murmur of voices as the exhibition continued, each painting a testament to survival and renewal. "What happens now?" I asked Detective Harris. "The investigation continues, but with this testimony, we can finally dismantle their entire network. Your story, your work here, it helped make this possible. Women came forward because they saw what you've built." Later that night, after the gallery lights dimmed and the last visitors departed, I stood alone among the paintings. Each canvas held echoes of pain transformed into power, fear transformed into freedom. My own series seemed to glow in the soft emergency lighting, the golden chains now clearly revealing what they had always been, shackles disguised as security. Claire found me there, 2 cups of real coffee in hand. "Want to talk about it?" We sat on the gallery bench, surrounded by art that spoke of survival. I told her everything Detective Harris had revealed, about Peter's calculated targeting, about the years of careful manipulation. "I feel so stupid," I admitted. "All those red flags I ignored." "Stop," Claire interrupted firmly. "You're not stupid. You're human. And you're also the woman who broke free, who built this program, who's helping others escape the same trap. That's what matters now." A text from Sarah Chen lit up my phone. "Meeting tomorrow about converting the house. Contractors ready to start renovations. This is really happening." I showed Claire the message, feeling hope rise above the weight of recent revelations. Want to help me plan the new space? We spent the next hour sketching possibilities on gallery notepads, the formal dining room becoming a counseling center, the master bedroom transformed into a meditation space, the kitchen where Peter had first showed his true nature becoming a communal area for healing and connection. Morning found me back at the house, watching contractors measure and plan. The autumn light streamed through windows that would soon be replaced, casting new shadows in familiar spaces. Detective Harris had arranged for police presence during the renovation, ensuring Peter's remaining associates couldn't interfere. Maria arrived with coffee and blueprints, her practical nature perfect for this phase of transformation. The board approved the additional funding, she announced. We can add the security systems and safe room you wanted. Room by room, we walked through the space that had once been my prison. Each step felt like reclaiming territory, not just for myself, but for every woman who would find shelter here. The contractor's questions grounded me in practical details. Where to add extra lighting, how to modify the security system, which walls could be removed to create more open spaces. Each decision moved us further from what the house had been and closer to what it would become. In the kitchen, I paused before the spot where Peter had first revealed his true nature, where he had thrown me out that fateful night. The memory no longer had power over me. Instead, I pictured future scenes, women gathering to share meals and stories, finding strength in community. Sarah Chen joined us mid-morning, bringing preliminary paperwork for the property's conversion to a nonprofit space. Once these are filed, she explained, the house will be legally protected. They can't touch it, no matter what happens with Peter's case. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with news from Detective Harris. Peter took a plea deal, testifying against the entire network. You don't have to appear in court. I sat on the stairs, the same stairs I had climbed countless nights, heavy with worry about Peter's gambling. Now they would lead to healing spaces, to rooms where other women could begin their journeys to freedom. Are you okay? Maria asked, sitting beside me. Better than okay, I realized. For the first time, I feel like everything that happened had a purpose. Not that it was right or fair, but that something meaningful could grow from it. The day continued in a whirl of activity. Rebecca arrived to help plan the art therapy space, her design experience proving invaluable. Grace stopped by on her lunch break, offering to create a mural for the entrance hall. Even Detective Harris returned, this time with resources for security planning. By sunset, the house had been thoroughly measured, photographed, and mapped for its transformation. As the contractors packed up their tools and the others said their goodbyes, I found myself alone in what had been our bedroom. The space felt smaller than I remembered, or perhaps I had grown larger than the constraints it once represented. Soon these walls would hear different stories, stories of hope, of healing, of women reclaiming their power. My phone buzzed again. Claire, checking in. Coming to dinner? Lucy's cooking that pasta you love. I took one last look around the room where I had spent so many nights trapped in fear and denial. The light through the window caught dust motes dancing in the air, transforming them into tiny stars. On my way, I texted back. Wait until you see the plans for this place. Driving through Portland's evening traffic, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Peter had thrown me out of this house, thinking he would break me. Instead, he had set in motion a chain of events that would help break his entire criminal network. The city lights blurred slightly as happy tears filled my eyes. Each turn brought me closer to the family I had chosen, Claire with her fierce loyalty, Maria with her steady wisdom, all the women who had become part of my journey. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, permits to secure, programs to develop, women to help guide toward freedom. But tonight, in this moment between what was and what would be, I was exactly where I needed to be. The house that had witnessed my imprisonment would become a gateway to freedom for others. The pain that had nearly broken me had instead forged me into someone stronger, someone capable of helping others break their own chains. I parked outside Claire's building, where warm light spilled from her windows and the smell of garlic, and Basil promised comfort and connection. Above the city, stars began to emerge, each one a reminder that light always returns after darkness. Peter had thrown me out, thinking it was an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning, not just for me, but for every woman who would find her way to healing through the programs we were building. I gathered my bag, filled with plans and possibilities, and headed toward the warmth of chosen family. Behind me, the city sparkled with promise. Before me lay a future I was finally ready to embrace, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a guide for others finding their way from darkness into light. Winter rain pelted against the windows of the newly renovated Hope Center Annex. What had once been my prison with Peter now transformed into a sanctuary of healing. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air as I arranged art supplies for the morning's first therapy session in the new space. Each brush, each color, each blank canvas represented possibility. The same possibility I had discovered when I chose myself over Peter's gambling addiction. A knock at the door made me turn. Detective Harris stood there, her usual professional demeanor softened by what looked like concern. "Got a minute, Amanda? There's something you need to know." My heart skipped a beat, but I was no longer the woman who lived in fear of bad news. I gestured for her to enter, noting how the morning light caught the silver threads in her hair. She'd been fighting this battle against financial abuse and gambling rings long before my case crossed her desk. "Peter's sentencing is tomorrow," she began, settling into one of the comfortable chairs we'd chosen specifically for their ability to make people feel safe. "But there's a complication. His brother Rob has been making waves, claiming you set Peter up, that you orchestrated everything to steal the house." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, but it passed quickly. The renovated space around us was proof enough of my intentions. Every room designed to help other women escape the same trap that had nearly destroyed me. "Let him talk," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "The truth speaks louder than his accusations." Detective Harris smiled, a rare expression that transformed her face. "That's what I told the DA, but there's more. We've identified 3 more women whose husbands were involved in Peter's gambling ring. They want to meet you." My hands busied themselves with arranging colored pencils while I processed this information. 3 more women, 3 more stories of manipulation and survival. When? They're here now. In the front room. I followed Detective Harris through the transformed house. The hallway where Peter had once pushed me against the wall in a rage now displayed artwork created by survivors. The kitchen where he'd thrown me out had become a gathering space for healing conversations over cups of tea. The women waited exactly where Detective Harris had said, huddled together on the plush sofa we'd chosen for its embracing comfort. Their faces showed different stages of the journey I knew so well. One still shell-shocked, one angry, one beginning to show signs of hope. "I'm Amanda," I said softly, sitting across from them. "Would you like some tea?" Maria appeared as if summoned, carrying a tray with her special blend of calming herbs. As she poured, I studied the women more carefully. The youngest couldn't have been more than 25, clutching her purse like a shield. The oldest had gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. "My husband Tom worked with Peter," the older woman began, her voice rough, with emotion. "They called it an investment group, but it was all gambling and lies. When I found out..." Her voice broke. The youngest reached over to squeeze her hand, a gesture of solidarity that brought tears to my eyes. This was why we had created this space, for moments like these, connections forged in shared pain and growing strength. "Tell me," I encouraged. Gently. "Tell me everything." The stories poured out, familiar yet unique. Each woman described the gradual erosion of trust, the mounting debts, the careful manipulation that made them doubt their own judgment. The youngest, Amy, had discovered her husband's involvement just weeks ago. The older woman, Patricia, had been living with the addiction for 15 years. I listened, offering tissues and understanding nods, seeing my own journey reflected in their tears. When they finished, I stood and walked to the window. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, leaving diamonds on the glass. "Would you like to see something?" I asked, leading them to the art therapy room. The morning light filled the space, with possibility, gleaming off clean brushes and fresh paints. "This is where we begin to heal," I explained, touching an empty canvas. "Not with words, but with colors and shapes. Sometimes our pain is too big for language, but art gives us another way to speak our truth." Amy approached an easel hesitantly, her fingers trailing over the blank surface. "I used to paint in college," she whispered, "before Mark told me it was a waste of time and money." Patricia joined her, picking up a brush with trembling fingers. "Tom always said art was for people who couldn't handle real life. And yet, here we are," I said, handling things they couldn't even face. The morning stretched into afternoon as we painted together. Maria brought lunch, homemade soup and fresh bread, but none of us wanted to stop. Each stroke of color seemed to release something held too long in silence. Claire stopped by during her lunch break, bringing her nursing perspective to our impromptu session. She watched as Patricia worked on a dark canvas shot through with streaks of light, as Amy began a series of small, interconnected circles that looked like breaking chains. "This is what healing looks like," Claire murmured to me. "This is why we fought so hard to create this space." By late afternoon, the walls were lined with still wet canvases. Each one told a story of pain, of resilience, of hope beginning to break through darkness. The women stood back, viewing their work with wonder. "I didn't know I had this in me," Amy said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "You have more in you than you know," I told her. "We all do." Detective Harris returned as we were cleaning brushes, her presence a reminder of the world, beyond our sanctuary. "The DA wants to know if you'll make a statement at Peter's sentencing tomorrow." I looked at the women working beside me, each finding her way back to herself through art and understanding. "Yes," I said, "not just for me, but for all of us." That evening, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in what had once been my bedroom. Now it was a meditation space, filled with soft cushions and gentle light. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside fresh and clean. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "Everything's ready for tomorrow. You've got this." I opened my sketchbook, allowing my feelings about Peter's sentencing to flow onto the page. Colors merged and separated, dark blues of fear, fierce reds of anger, and finally, emerging from the chaos, the clear gold of truth. A soft knock interrupted my work. Maria stood in the doorway, her face gentle with understanding. "The evening group is gathering downstairs. Rebecca brought that tea you like." I closed my sketchbook, tucking tomorrow's worries away with it. Right now, there were women downstairs beginning their own journeys to freedom. They needed me present and strong, not lost in memories of Peter. The evening group had grown since we opened the annex. Tonight, faces new and familiar turned toward me as I entered the community room. Rebecca had indeed brought tea, its spicy aroma filling the space with warmth. "Before we begin," I said, settling into my usual chair, "I want to share something with you." Tomorrow, I faced the man who thought he could break me. But standing here, looking at all of you, I know he failed. Because breaking isn't the end of the story. It's often just the beginning. Grace raised her hand, her voice steady as she spoke. "We'd like to come with you tomorrow, not all of us, but some, to show support." Tears pricked my eyes as heads nodded around the room. these women, each carrying their own burdens, wanted to stand with me. The isolation Peter had cultivated for so long shattered in the face of such solidarity. Later, as the group worked on their projects, I moved among them offering guidance and encouragement. A new woman, barely older than Amy, struggled with her brush strokes. "I can't get it right," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "There is no right in healing," I told her. "There's only true. What feels true to you in this moment?" She considered the canvas, then chose a bold red paint. Her next strokes were stronger, more confident. I watched her for a moment, remembering my own first tentative steps toward reclaiming my voice through art. As evening deepened into night, the women gradually departed, each carrying their artwork and a little more hope than they'd arrived with. Claire and Maria stayed to help me close up, our movements practiced after months of working together. "Need company tonight?" Claire asked, knowing tomorrow's significance. I shook my head, smiling at her concern. I need to do this part alone. But thank you. For everything. The drive home through Portland's rain-washed streets felt like a journey through time. Past the courthouse where I would face Peter tomorrow. Past the bank where I'd first discovered his gambling debts. Past the Thai restaurant where Claire had helped me plan my escape. My apartment welcomed me with the scent of paint and possibility. Canvases lined the walls, my own journey documented in color and form. The newest piece, still unfinished on my easel, showed a woman standing in rays of breaking light. I changed into comfortable clothes and made tea, settling by the window to watch the city lights flicker like stars. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight I was safe, strong, and surrounded by the evidence of how far I'd come. My phone lit up with messages of support, from Detective Harris, from Sarah Chen, from the women at the center. Each one a reminder that I wasn't alone anymore, would never be alone again. The last message was from Maria. "Remember, your strength isn't in facing him. It's in everything you've built since leaving him." I touched the screen gently, gratitude filling my heart. Peter had thrown me out, thinking he would destroy me. Instead, he had forced me to discover a strength I never knew I possessed. Tomorrow, I would speak my truth in court, not just for myself, but for Amy and Patricia, for Rebecca and Grace, for every woman still trapped in the web of addiction and abuse. My voice would carry their stories too, a testimony to survival and renewal. The city hummed softly outside my window, a lullaby of urban life continuing despite personal storms. Somewhere out there, other women were facing their own darkest moments. But now there was a light burning in the night, a renovated house turned sanctuary, where art and understanding offered a path to healing. I picked up my sketchbook one last time, adding final touches to tomorrow's truth. The woman in breaking. Light gained definition. Her face turned toward dawn, her shadows transforming into wings. The courthouse steps gleamed with early morning frost as I made my way up, each breath visible in the winter air. Detective Harris walked beside me, her steady presence a reminder of how far I'd come since that first terrified visit to her office. Behind us, a small group of women from the Hope Center followed. Rebecca, Grace, and others who had insisted on being here for Peter's sentencing. Sarah Chen met us at the top of the steps, her briefcase clutched tight against the cold. "They brought him in through the back entrance," she said quietly. "Rob's here too, with a few of Peter's old associates. Just remember, you're safe. Security's been briefed." The familiar marble halls felt different today. My heels clicked against the floor with purpose rather than fear as we made our way to the courtroom. Through the tall windows, sunlight caught. Ice crystals in the air, transforming them into tiny prisms of light. Emily, a new member of our art therapy group, touched my arm gently. "The painting you helped me create last week? I brought a photo of it. For strength." She showed me her phone. The image of breaking chains we'd worked on together glowed on the screen. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. I felt Rob's glare before I saw him, his anger radiating from the front row where he sat with people I recognized from Peter's gambling days, but their presence no longer held power over me. As we settled into our seats, I caught glimpses of Peter being led in. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suits replaced by prison garb. His confident swagger diminished. When he turned and our eyes met, I saw something I'd never expected: fear. The proceedings began with formal declarations and legal terminology, but I barely heard them. My mind was filled with images of all the women who had found their way to the Hope Center, each carrying stories similar to mine. Their strength flowed through me as the prosecutor began outlining the case. "Your Honor," she began, "the defendant's crimes go far beyond simple gambling addiction. Mr. Wilson was a key player in a sophisticated criminal enterprise that deliberately targeted vulnerable families through his position as a real estate agent. He identified potential victims, gained their trust, and systematically destroyed their financial stability." I watched Peter's shoulders tense as the prosecutor detailed his crimes: the forged documents, the stolen identities, the carefully orchestrated manipulation of countless families. Each revelation seemed to shrink him further, stripping away the charming facade he'd maintained for so long. When it came time for victim impact statements, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. But I was already standing, my prepared notes forgotten in my purse. The walk to the podium felt like crossing a bridge from my old life to my new one. I took a deep breath, looking not at Peter, but at the women who had come to support me. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and steady. "When my husband threw me out of our house for refusing to pay his gambling debts, I thought it was the end of my world. What I didn't realize was that it was actually the beginning of my freedom." The courtroom fell silent as I spoke, describing not just the financial abuse and manipulation, but the strength I'd found in its aftermath. I talked about the Hope Center, about women helping women break free from similar situations. "Peter didn't just steal money," I continued. "He stole years of my life, my sense of self-worth, my trust in my own judgment. But in throwing me out, he accidentally gave me the greatest gift, the chance to reclaim everything he had taken and to help others do the same." Rob shifted uncomfortably in his seat as I described his role in enabling Peter's addiction and crimes. Several of Peter's former associates avoided my gaze. "But Peter?" Peter stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between recognition and regret. "The house he tried to take from me has become a sanctuary for other survivors," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Every room where I once felt trapped now holds space for healing. Every wall that witnessed my fear now displays artwork created by women finding their own path to freedom." As I spoke about the art therapy program, about watching women transform their pain into power, I saw tears in the eyes of several jurors. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, her usual stern expression softened by interest. "I'm not here seeking revenge," I concluded. "I'm here asking for justice, not just for myself, but for every woman still trapped in similar situations." Peter's crimes weren't just about money, they were about power, control, and the systematic destruction of human dignity. But today proves that even the most carefully constructed web of lies eventually breaks in the face of truth. Returning to my seat, I felt lighter somehow, as if speaking my truth had released the last lingering shadows of Peter's influence. Rebecca gripped my hand, her own eyes shining with tears and determination. The judge's voice cut through the emotional aftermath of my statement. "Mr. Wilson, please rise." Peter stood slowly, his attorney at his side. The judge looked at him for a long moment before speaking, her words measured and clear. "The evidence presented in this case reveals a pattern of deliberate, calculated criminal behavior that goes far beyond addiction. You didn't just gamble with money. You gambled with people's lives, their homes, their futures. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 8 years. The sound of handcuffs clicking into place echoed through the courtroom. As officers led Peter away, he tried to turn toward me, but I was already standing, gathering my belongings, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. In the hallway, Rob approached, despite Detective Harris's warning look. "Amanda, wait. Please, I need to tell you something." I paused, surprised by the desperation in his voice. "What is it, Rob?" He ran a hand through his graying hair, suddenly looking old and tired. "I knew about everything. The targeting, the fraud, all of it. I helped him hide it from you, and I'm sorry." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of complicity and denial. I studied his face, seeing for the first time the toll his own choices had taken. "Thank you for the apology," I said quietly. "But if you really want to make amends, get help. Break free from this life before you end up where Peter is." Outside, the winter sun had warmed the courthouse steps, melting the morning frost. My group of supporters gathered around me, their presence a shield against the cold wind and lingering emotions. "Lunch," Claire suggested, appearing with perfect timing as always. "I think this calls for celebration." But I had somewhere else to be. "The morning art therapy group starts in an hour," I reminded them. "Today's session feels more important than ever." Maria smiled, understanding in her eyes. "I'll drive you." The Hope Center Annex welcomed us with warmth and light. Windows that had once been covered by heavy drapes now let in streams of sunlight. The art room hummed with creative energy as women began arriving, each carrying their own stories of survival. Amy was there, her young face showing new strength as she set up her easel. Patricia arrived with fresh flowers for the community room, her gray-streaked hair now styled with confidence rather than hidden under a scarf. "I saw the news about the sentencing," one of the newer women said hesitantly. "That's why I finally found the courage to come here. If you could speak your truth, maybe I can too." I helped her select colors for her first painting, remembering my own tentative steps toward healing through art. "There's no timeline for finding your voice," I told her. "Just know that when you're ready, you'll have an entire community supporting you." The session flowed naturally, brush strokes and quiet conversations creating a symphony of recovery. Through the windows, I could see snow beginning to fall, each flake a tiny reminder that nature itself celebrates new beginnings. Sarah Chen stopped by near the end of the session, legal papers in hand. "The house transfer is complete," she announced. "The Hope Center Annex is now officially protected as a non-profit space. They can never touch it again." The women around the room broke into spontaneous applause, understanding the significance of this victory. This space that had once represented imprisonment would now forever be a gateway to freedom. As evening approached, I found myself alone in the meditation room, watching snow collect on the windowsill. The day's emotions washed over me. Relief, triumph, lingering sadness for the years lost to Peter's manipulation. My phone buzzed with a message from Detective Harris. 2 more women came forward after hearing about the sentencing. They're ready to tell their stories. You've started something powerful here. I looked around the room that had once been my bedroom, now transformed into a space for healing and reflection. The walls that had witnessed my darkest moments now held messages of hope and renewal. Opening my sketchbook, I began to draw, letting the day's experiences flow through my hands onto paper. The image that emerged surprised me. Not a butterfly, or breaking chains, but a simple door standing open, light pouring through. A soft knock interrupted my work. Emily stood in the doorway, her canvas from today's session in her hands. "I think I finally got it right," she said, turning the painting toward me. The canvas showed a woman standing at a crossroads, but unlike her earlier versions, this one wasn't alone. She was surrounded by other women, their hands linked, their faces turned toward a rising sun. "It's all of us," Emily explained softly. "Everyone who helped me find my way here. Everyone who showed me that being thrown away by someone who claimed to love me wasn't the end of my story." I hugged her, careful not to smudge her still-drying painting. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Portland in a blanket of pristine white. Inside, surrounded by art and healing, I felt the last pieces of my own recovery falling into place. Peter had thrown me out, thinking he would break me. Instead, he had inadvertently launched me into a life filled with purpose, strength, and the joy of helping others find their way to freedom. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to become exactly who we were meant to be. The evening group would be arriving soon, women seeking their own paths to healing through art and understanding. I gathered my supplies, ready to guide them through another session of creative recovery. Each brushstroke, each color choice, each moment of breakthrough represented another step toward freedom. And in helping others find their way, I had finally found mine. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of my office at the Hope Center Annex, casting warm patterns across a stack of grant applications. 1 year had passed since Peter's sentencing, and our little sanctuary had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. The ringing of my phone interrupted my review of funding proposals. "Amanda Wilson?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "This is Dr. Rachel Chen from Seattle Grace Hospital. We've heard about your art therapy program for survivors of financial abuse. Would you consider consulting with us about implementing something similar here?" My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the first such call we'd received, but each one still filled me with a mix of excitement and humility. As I jotted down details, Maria appeared in my doorway, gesturing urgently. "I'll call you back this afternoon," I promised Dr. Chen, setting down the phone. "What's wrong?" Maria's face was troubled. "There's a young woman in the garden. She's been sitting there for hours, just staring at the building. Detective Harris asked us to keep an eye out for her. She's connected to one of Peter's former associates." I moved to the window overlooking our healing garden, a space we'd created from what was once an overgrown backyard. A slight figure sat hunched on the meditation bench, her dark hair hiding her face. Something about her posture spoke of desperate exhaustion. "I'll go," I said, grabbing my cardigan. The spring air still carried a hint of winter's chill. The garden path wound through newly planted flower beds, each one tended by women in our program. Rebecca's butterfly bushes were just beginning to bud, promising summer blooms that would attract real butterflies to mirror the ones in her paintings. As I approached the bench, the young woman tensed but didn't flee. Up close, I could see she was barely more than a teenager. Her expensive clothes wrinkled as if she'd been wearing them for days. "I'm Amanda," I said softly, settling on the far end of the bench. "Would you like some tea? We have a kettle always ready inside." She shook her head slightly, then spoke in a whisper. "You don't understand. I shouldn't be here. If they find out." "Who are they?" I asked, though I had a sinking suspicion I knew the answer. "My father's business partners." She finally looked up, revealing a face bruised by more than just physical blows. "They're like the men who hurt you, the ones who worked with your husband." The old fear tried to surface, but I breathed through it. "What's your name?" "Sophie." She twisted a silver ring on her finger. "Sophie Martinez. My father. He gambles, but it's more than that. He finds other people to bring into their game. Rich people, desperate people. When they can't pay..." She trailed off, shuddering. "When they can't pay, the threats start," I finished gently. "The demands, the pressure, the fear." Sophie nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Last week, I found out what he really does, how he picks the targets. There was this woman. She had 2 kids. They took everything from her, and my father, He laughed about it. Inside, I could see Maria watching through the window, phone in hand, likely updating Detective Harris. But this moment was too delicate for police intervention. Sophie, listen to me carefully. You're safe here. This entire building is secure. No one can come in without going through multiple checkpoints. Would you like to come inside? Maybe look at some of our art therapy spaces? She hesitated, then stood on shaking legs. I didn't touch her, but stayed close as we walked the garden, path to the back entrance. The security system beeped softly as we entered, its presence reassuring rather than intrusive. The art room was empty between sessions, afternoon light playing across easels and supply shelves. Sophie's steps slowed as she took in the paintings displayed on the walls, each one a story of survival and transformation. "Did you make these?" "Ah," she asked, stopping before a series showing a woman emerging from darkness into light. "Some of them. Others were created by women who came here looking for a way forward, just like you're doing now." I selected a blank canvas, setting it on the nearest easel. "Would you like to try?" For the next hour, Sophie painted in silence, her strokes aggressive at first, then gradually softening. The image that emerged was chaotic but powerful. A birdcage with its door hanging open, dark wings visible in the background. Maria brought tea, setting it quietly beside us before withdrawing. As Sophie worked, I noticed details I'd missed. In the garden, old scars on her arms, the way she flinched at sudden movements, how her expensive clothes couldn't quite hide her thinness. "My mother left when I was 12, she said suddenly, not looking up from her painting. "I always thought it was because of his gambling. Now I wonder if she knew about the rest of it, about what he really does to people." "Have you had any contact with her?" I asked, carefully keeping my tone neutral. Sophie shook her head. "Father?" said she abandoned us. "But last night, I found letters in his office. Dozens of them, returned unopened. She tried to reach me for years." The sound of the security door opening made Sophie tense, but it was only Detective Harris, her presence, as calm and steady as always. She took in the scene, the painting, the tea, the tentative trust being built. "Sophie," she said gently, "your mother is waiting at my office. Would you like to see her?" The paintbrush clattered to the floor. Sophie's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "She's here? In Portland?" "She's been looking for you for months," Detective Harris explained. "When she heard about our investigation into your father's operation, she came immediately. She wants to help you get out safely." Sophie's legs gave way, and I guided her to a chair. Her whole body trembled as Detective Harris explained how they'd been building a case against her father's gambling ring, how her mother had been working with authorities to document the abuse and exploitation. "But where would I go?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "I don't have anything. No money, no job skills." "You have more than you know," I told her, gesturing to her painting. "Look what you created in just 1 hour. Imagine what you could do with real support and freedom." Maria appeared with a folder, the same information packet we gave all new participants in our program. "We have connections with safe houses, job training programs, counseling services. Your mother has already arranged an apartment near her home in Seattle, but you're welcome to stay in our transitional housing until you feel ready." Sophie's fingers traced the edges of her painting, following the lines of the dark wings stretching toward freedom. "Will they come after me? Father's associates?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Detective Harris assured her. "We've been dismantling their network piece by piece since Peter's conviction. Your testimony could help us finish the job." I watched as Sophie processed this information, seeing the same calculations I'd once made, weighing safety against fear, freedom against familiar chains. Finally, she squared her shoulders. "I want to help, not just with testimony. I want to do what you do here. help other people escape. Pride and protectiveness surged through me. One step at a time, I advised. First, let's get you safely to your mother. Then we can talk about your future. As Detective Harris led Sophie out to her car, I stayed in the art room, studying her painting. The dark wings she'd drawn held hints of iridescent color, visible only when the light hit them just right, like hope emerging from shadows. Maria joined me, her presence comforting as always. You know what this means, don't you? If Sophie testifies, if she helps bring down her father's operation, it could expose the entire network, I finished. Not just in Portland, but across the West Coast. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. Our little sanctuary might soon face an influx of survivors as more gambling rings were exposed, more families freed from the cycle of addiction and abuse. My phone buzzed. Dr. Chen from Seattle Grace following up about the consultation. Looking at Sophie's painting, I made a decision. Maria, how would you feel about expanding our program? Not just here, but helping other cities set up similar centers? Her smile was answer enough. We spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming possibilities. Satellite locations, training programs for art therapists, partnerships with hospitals, and women's shelters. As evening approached, Claire arrived with takeout dinner, a regular tradition since the days when she'd first sheltered me. She listened to our plans with growing excitement. You know what this means? She asked, stealing one of my spring rolls. Everything Peter did, all the pain he caused, it's being transformed into something powerful. Something that helps people heal. Later, alone in my office, I added Sophie's painting to our gallery wall. Each canvas told a story of survival, of strength found in darkness. Her dark wings joined the butterflies, the breaking chains, the opening doors, different symbols of the same truth. Freedom is possible. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Detective Harris. Sophie's safe with her mother. She asked for art supplies. You've started something remarkable here. Looking around the space that had once been my prison, now transformed into a sanctuary of healing, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Peter had thrown me out, thinking he would break me. Instead, he had set in motion a wave of transformation that was still rippling outward, touching lives he'd never imagined. I opened my laptop to begin drafting proposals for our expansion. Plans. Outside my window, the garden glowed in the sunset light, Rebecca's butterfly bushes casting long shadows across new growth. Spring was a season of beginnings, of seeds taking root and spreading their influence in unexpected directions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more survivors seeking shelter, more stories needing to be heard, more healing to facilitate. But tonight, in this moment, I felt the rightness of my path. Sometimes being thrown away leads us exactly where we need to be, not just for our own healing, but for the healing of others. The security system beeped softly, reminding me of its protective presence. In the art room across the hall, I could hear the evening group arriving for their session. Women's voices mingled with the gentle clinking of paintbrushes and teacups. The soundtrack of recovery, of hope, taking root and growing strong. I added one final note to my proposal. Art therapy isn't just about creating beauty from pain. It's about recognizing that we all carry the seeds of transformation within us. Sometimes we just need a safe place to let them grow. The morning sun painted Portland's skyline in shades of rose and gold as I stood before the assembled crowd. 2 years had passed since Peter had thrown me out of our house, and now I faced a room full of people gathered for the opening of our Fifth Hope Center location. Television cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking as reporters prepared to cover the expansion of our program. The mayor sat in the front row beside Detective Harris, both of them beaming with pride. But my eyes were drawn to the women who filled most of the seats, survivors, supporters, and staff members from all our centers. Rebecca, now our lead art therapy coordinator, gave me an encouraging nod from her place near the podium. Her butterfly, Series had become the symbol of our program, reproduced on brochures and websites across the country. Claire squeezed my hand as I stepped up to speak. 2 years ago, I stood in a kitchen and heard the words that would change my life forever. I began, my voice steady despite the emotions welling up inside. My husband, caught in the grip of gambling addiction, threw me out of our home when I refused to surrender my inheritance to pay his debts. In that moment, I thought my world was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. The room fell silent as I shared our journey. How one house had become 5 centers. How one woman's pain had transformed into a movement of healing and hope. I spoke about the hundreds of survivors who had found their way to freedom through our programs, about the gambling rings exposed and dismantled, about the power of art to heal wounds that words couldn't touch. Today, we're not just opening another center, I continued, gesturing to the beautifully renovated building behind me. We're declaring that no one has to face financial abuse alone. That addiction doesn't have to destroy families. That being thrown away can sometimes be the first step toward finding your true worth. As I spoke, Sophie moved quietly through the crowd, distributing programs decorated with her distinctive artwork. In the 2 years since she'd first sat in our garden, she had blossomed into a powerful advocate for survivors, her own story inspiring others to break free from similar situations. Maria joined me at the podium, bringing the oversized scissors for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The red ribbon stretched across the center's entrance seemed to glow in the morning light, another boundary being broken, another door opening to possibility. Before making the cut, I turned back to the audience. Each of you carries a story of survival, of strength found in darkness. Today we celebrate not just the opening of a new center, but the continuation of a journey we're all taking together, from victims to survivors to warriors for change. The scissors sliced through the ribbon with a satisfying snip, and applause thundered through the crowd. As people began moving inside to tour the facility, Detective Harris approached with a woman I didn't recognize. Amanda, this is District Attorney Sarah Matthews from Los Angeles. She's interested in implementing our program in California. The DA extended her hand, her grip firm and warm. What you've built here is remarkable, she said. We've been following your success rates. The combination of art therapy, financial counseling, and legal support, it's revolutionary. Would you consider consulting with us on establishing something similar? Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A young woman had arrived, clutching a small child to her chest, her face bearing the unmistakable marks of recent trauma. I excused myself from the DA and moved quickly to meet her, Sophie falling into step beside me. We guided the newcomer to our intake room, a space specifically designed to feel safe and welcoming. I saw the news, the woman whispered, her child sleeping against her shoulder. About your program, about how you help people escape. My husband. He gambles. He's involved with dangerous people. Last night, he threatened. You're safe now, I assured her, my heart aching at the familiar story. Let's get you and your little one settled, and then we can talk about your options. As Sophie helped the woman get comfortable, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The frightened art teacher who had once stood in a kitchen listening to her husband's threats was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned to transform pain into purpose. The day continued in a whirl of activity. Tours for supporters and media, meetings with potential partners, counseling sessions with new arrivals. Our art therapy rooms filled with women exploring their creativity, many picking up brushes for the first time since childhood. In the afternoon, I found a quiet moment to slip into my favorite spot, the rooftop garden we'd created as a peaceful retreat. The Portland skyline stretched before me, familiar yet somehow new. Each building held stories of other women who might need our help, other lives waiting to be transformed. Claire found me there, 2 cups of tea in hand. Penny for your thoughts? I accepted the tea gratefully. Just thinking about how far we've come. Remember that first night at your apartment? When I showed up with nothing but my purse and broken dreams? And now look at you, running 5 centers, consulting with other cities, changing lives every day. She bumped my shoulder affectionately, though you still can't make decent tea. Our laughter was interrupted by Maria calling from the stairwell. Amanda? The film crew is ready for your interview about the expansion plans. The rest of the day passed in a blur of cameras and questions, tours and testimonials. By evening, when the last visitor had left and the center settled into its nighttime routine, I found myself back in the first art therapy room we'd ever created. The walls held memories. Rebecca's first butterfly painting, Sophie's dark wings, breaking free, countless other images of transformation and hope. A new canvas waited on my favorite easel, blank and full of possibility. As I began to paint, letting the day's emotions flow through my brush, Detective Harris appeared in the doorway. Thought you'd want to know, Peter's former associate. The one we've been tracking in Seattle? He turned himself in today. Said his daughter showed him your program's website, made him realize the damage he was doing. The news settled over me like a warm blanket. Another link in the chain of addiction and abuse broken, another family finding their way toward healing. Later that night, as I prepared to leave, the young woman from this morning emerged from her temporary room. Her child slept peacefully in the new crib we'd provided, tiny hands curled into fists of determination. I never thought I could be strong enough to leave, she said softly. But seeing all of this, seeing what you built after being thrown away, it gives me hope. I showed her to the art therapy room, where an easel waited with fresh paper and paints. Tomorrow, you'll start your own journey of healing. Tonight, just rest and know you're safe. Driving home through Portland's evening traffic, I reflected on the day's events. Each new center we opened, each survivor who found their way to us, was a testament to the power of transformation. Peter had thought throwing me out would destroy me, but he had instead sparked a movement that was changing lives across the country. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. LA Center's art program launches next month. You're still coming to help set it up, right? I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities I never could have imagined on that dark night when my world seemed to end. At home, I settled into my favorite chair by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. On my easel, a new painting took shape, not of butterflies or breaking chains, but of a garden growing from concrete, flowers pushing through cracks to reach the sun. A text from Claire made me laugh. Don't forget dinner tomorrow. We're celebrating. Your Empire of Hope. Empire of Hope. The phrase stuck with me as I added final touches to my painting. That's what we had built from the ashes of my failed marriage. Not just shelters or therapy centers, but beacons of possibility for anyone facing their own dark night of the soul. The city hummed softly outside my window, a lullaby of urban life continuing despite personal storms. Somewhere out there, other women were facing their own moments of crisis, their own versions of being thrown away. But now there was a light, burning in the night. Not just one center, but 5 and growing, each offering a path to healing and hope. I picked up my brush one last time, adding a final detail to my painting. A small door standing open in the garden wall, light spilling out to guide others home. Because that's what we had really created. Not just places of refuge, but gateways to new beginnings. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.